Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be ranking every single mainline Pokemon game that they've ever released, and I'm probably going to crash out and you guys are probably going to hate me in the comment section below, but that's fine. And with that being said, let's talk about red, blue, and yellow. Okay, the first ever Pokemon game that I ever owned was actually yellow version. It's still this is the one. Can you tell by the logo being completely destroyed? Okay, I have my original yellow version in this custom case, and so I'm a little bit biased. Okay, I'm 30 years old, so that means Gen 1 was my first ever generation of Pokemon, so these have a soft spot in my heart. Okay, I will admit though, they're not perfect. They're filled with glitches. They're a little bit slow. The story is not really there, although the story back then, because Pokemon was so new, the novelty was that it was your story. It was your adventure. You were the one, the main character, right? You didn't have to worry about, you know, too much of an antagonist or any sort of motivation to play. The motivation was just you want to catch them all. Okay, now there's a little bit of a story. There's Team Rocket, Giovanni, yada yada yada, but really you're the main character, and that's this is your story. And so it could be better in the story department. Obviously the graphics were horrible, but it is great for its time, and I really want to drive that point home that these games were incredible for their time, right? Obviously graphically they don't hold up, gameplay they don't hold up, balance wise, competitive wise they don't hold up really in the same way. You can't hold them to the same standards as other games, but when you put them into perspective of these were the first, these were the ones that started everything. These were built on a Game Boy, like not even the color, the regular Game Boy black and white. These set the foundation for the franchise, and they did so much heavy lifting. There was so much lore, and the artwork, the concept, for me these are a strong A. These are a strong A for those reasons. Without these games, the rest of this list would not exist. That is a fact. They spawned Pokemon. They're not perfect, but they're great. Between the two, which one is better? It's really hard for me to say. I love how in yellow version you get to get all of the starter Pokemon, but in a way that kind of makes the diversity of teams and compositions a little bit worse, right? Like most people growing up probably had Pikachu, Charizard, Venusaur, Blastoise, Pidgeot, and then Snorlax or something like that. Like the diversity in teams here was very limited, whereas when you're forced to pick a starter, there's a lot more you can do. People branch out, they get one of the evolutions, they get Arcanine or Electabuzz or whatever the case might be. So these are a tie in my mind. These are a tie. They both have their pros and cons. Obviously the graphics were a little bit better in yellow, and it is kind of the definitive version. You've got a little bit more story, so I'm going to give the edge to yellow here, even though I think you can make the argument for either. Next up is gold and silver, the first Game Boy Color Pokemon games, and man, the artwork on the back of these just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the artwork just sends me back, right? It sends me back, and needless to say, gold and silver are incredible. They took what the first generation did, they made it even better. They added a whole new region in the form of Johto, but it was such a massive world. You could go back after you beat the Elite Four to Kanto, and you could re-battle all those old gym leaders that you know and love from red, blue, and yellow. Everything was now in color. There was 100 new Pokemon, or however many it was. Maybe it was only like 50 new Pokemon. I don't remember how many exactly they added to this, but just the combination of the, you know, the hype of red, blue, and yellow, Pokemania in the early, like in the year 2000 2001 was just through the roof, right? I mean, and getting to see the new Pokemon sort of teased and leaked in the anime. You had Togepi, right? Meryl was going around the internet, the early stages of the internet. These games are iconic, and some players will say that these are some of the best Pokemon games ever made, period. And for me, they do go in A. These are A tier Pokemon games. They are great. Again, they do lack some of the story of future Pokemon games. They lack some of the future mechanics, although we did get like egg Pokemon, for example, in this generation, so it did add a ton for you know, a Game Boy Color game, right? But it still is lacking a lot. The story again was a little bit mid. There was a little bit more, right? Like with the 8th gym leader being that you go to the dragon's lair and all that sort of stuff, Dragon's Den, whatever it was called, and your rival being an a-hole, and the return or the breaking up of Team Rocket, and how like Giovanni's no longer the leader and they're taking over the tower, and then you have the shiny Pokemon, which was first introduced into this generation. So a lot to love, but not perfect. Okay, a lot to love, but not perfect, and that is kind of how I'm defining the A tier here of Pokemon. Crystal Pokemon Crystal version. Here's the thing about Pokemon Crystal. Crystal is the definitive Gen 2 game, at least on the Game Boy Color, right? And the thing about Pokemon Crystal is it did have more story. It had a unique story about Suicune, right? You also could play as a girl in this game, which was a big deal for a lot of the female Pokemon players, right? Like there was a lot to love about Pokemon Crystal as the quote unquote definitive version on Gen 2. However, for me, I'm gonna be real with you guys. Suicune has a great story, but I didn't really fall in love with it. It's good, but for me, the definitive Gen 2 experience on Game Boy Color, I felt, was the Lugia Ho-Oh experience. Suicune taking the center stage in this game is cool, I like it, but for me personally, I feel like Lugia is a way more interesting legendary than Suicune, and the duality of Lugia and Ho-Oh was just way cooler to me than Suicune as a blue purple dog. And again, I'm really, that's the only reason to me that this game falls a little bit short. Otherwise it's 99% the same, right? So don't get me wrong, I feel like if you ask most players, they're going to prefer Crystal, and there's something to love about Crystal, right? But for me, I prefer Gold and Silver, and for that reason, Crystal is our first B tier game. This is a high B tier. Again, I respect Crystal, I love Crystal, and I understand that some people are going to prefer Crystal over Gold and Silver, but for me, it really comes down to the story and the box legendaries at this point. And I just think Lugia and Ho-Oh are way cooler. Spoiler alert, I had Silver version, okay, and Lugia is just so cool, one of the coolest legendaries they've ever made in Pokemon, so that's why there's a soft spot in my heart for Gold and Silver. Next up, moving on to Ruby and Sapphire. These two games, bro, when I tell you popping Pokemon Sapphire in, and this is again still my original Pokemon Sapphire from back in the day, popping this into the Game Boy Advance for the first time and seeing the graphics, bro, I cannot begin to explain to you the graphical jump from Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold and Silver Crystal to Ruby and Sapphire. It felt like night and day. Like there was suddenly a slight depth to the game where like you could, it's hard to even describe to you, but you can step behind buildings, right? I don't even, you know, if you know, you know, but basically you had to be there to appreciate the jump in graphical fidelity. And really, I loved Ruby and Sapphire. I thought the duality between the ground lovers and the sea lovers, I thought that was cool. I thought it actually brought a unique story to Pokemon that was epic in proportions. You're fighting to save the world for the first time in this series, more or less, and I just thought it was awesome. I thought these games were incredible. I thought they took the Pokemon franchise to a whole new level. I will admit that some of the designs of the Pokemon in this generation were okay. They were a little lacking in my opinion. The box legendaries are not nearly as cool as Ho-Oh or Lugia. Let's just be real, okay? I love Groudon, I love Kyogre, but they just aren't as cool as Ho-Oh and Lugia. They're simply not, okay? But from a story perspective, from a graphical jump perspective, they added new Pokemon. These are incredible Pokemon games, and they once again will find themselves in the A tier. Now, this is going to be probably my first hot take. Emerald, it's a better version, right? It's better than Ruby and Sapphire on paper and kind of objectively, right? Like if we're talking about like they just added the battle frontier, more post game, boom, like it's just a better game, right? I played so much Ruby and Sapphire that when Emerald came out, I also got it, played through it, beat it, and it is the definitive version, right? But for me, the sort of Rayquaza story is more of an afterthought than the clash between the Groudon and the Kyogre. That just was like center stage. That was the main event, and then the Rayquaza storyline is awesome, it's epic, but again, it's not as interesting of a storyline to me as the Groudon Kyogre storyline, and in the same way as the Suicune storyline compared to, you know, the main event of the Gold versus Silver, to me, I know, and honestly it goes above Crystal. It does. I get that it's the definitive version, I get that it has the best post game, I understand all of that, right? But from an impact perspective on the franchise, the impact that Ruby and Sapphire had by being the first jump to the Game Boy Advance was just epic. It was just it was night and day compared to, you know, Gold, Silver, Crystal, and Emerald was just more of the same with a little bit extra. So for me, looking at it from that perspective, it's like, you know, today if I was going to go back and play one of the Gen 3 games, it would be Emerald, right? But if I'm looking back and I think about the impact that these games had, it wasn't on the same level. It wasn't. I'm sorry. Fire Red and Leaf Green, ladies and gentlemen. Oh baby, these are so good, dude. These are so good. These are remakes of an A tier game, right? I mean, it is what it is. They remade these for the Game Boy Advance. First and foremost, it basically brings Kanto into this new generation, but also, you know, a lot of these Gen 1 Pokemon were not really available in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and so it kind of, and because they were on different consoles, you know, you couldn't transfer between your Red, Blue, Yellow to your Ruby and Sapphire or Emerald, for example. So this bridged that gap, and it brought all of the Pokemon onto the Game Boy Advance, right? And it did so flawlessly. It just brought the franchise, the beginning of the franchise that we knew and loved. It gave it a huge fresh coat of paint. It fixed a ton of the bugs. It added a post game with the Sevi Islands. There's just so much to love here, and also the fact that we finally got Venusaur as a box art is just, it's incredible, right? And they also threw in some Johto Pokemon too in the end game, where you could, or in the post game I should say, where you could get your hands on like Tyranitar and things like that. So needless to say, this is an S tier Pokemon game. It takes everything that was in Red, Blue, and Yellow. It does it better than that. It delivers it better than that, with better graphics, better music, better everything, right? It's just the best way to play Gen 1, in my opinion. Easy S tier. I didn't even have to think about it. That's just a no-brainer to me. Next up is Diamond and Pearl, and just like Ruby and Sapphire, this was the first sort of jump into the next system. These were the first on the DS. I was a Diamond kid. I thought Pearl, it's pink, that's for girls, and so I got Diamond, and I mean, obviously I got both, but these games are, they're incredible, right? They're incredible. And in the same vein as the Ruby Sapphire jump to the new console, this just did the DS so good. It added the space versus time dynamic in another story, right? And man, what I would do to go back to 2007 and relive the launch of Diamond and Pearl. That being said, okay, that being said, I didn't love a lot of the Pokemon designs in this game. Okay, now obviously Empoleon, cool. Infernape, cool. Torterra, a little bit mid. Okay, a little bit mid from a starter perspective, and ultimately the games did play pretty slow, right? They played pretty slow. The balance of Pokemon that you could get throughout the game was a little bit weird. It wasn't great. It wasn't perfectly optimized. So truly epic games. They were incredible for the system, for the DS, and being an introduction to Pokemon on the DS, but I do feel like they fell a little bit short. I think like there was so much there, but I don't know, I just feel like they kind of lost me with the Pokemon designs here a little bit. Palkia is just like, what is that, bro? He needs to see a chiropractor. He's hunched over, man. Like, that's how I sit when I'm editing this video, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, these were the first games with the global trade system, and I remember I had a whiteboard and I would go through and like write down all the Pokemon that I needed to get so I could trade them for Pokemon that I thought were harder to get. Great games, solid B tier. Platinum, however, Platinum, baby. Yo, this fixed a lot of the problems with the pacing of the games, with the variety of Pokemon available in Diamond and Pearl. Plus you got the Giratina story where you go into the distortion world, you know, the shadow realm basically, which I thought was epic. Okay, I thought it was cool. You're walking up walls and stuff. I thought it was so cool. It was so well done. And unlike the quote unquote definitive versions of the previous generation, I feel like this truly was, it was everything we wanted and more, and I do feel like this is a solid A tier. So much so that I would even put it, you know, I'm gonna rearrange this. I think this is my ranking. I think that's my ranking, truthfully. Like, Platinum was where it was at. This was my favorite of the three for sure. I think he's the coolest looking of the different legendaries, or the legendary trio from that generation. I loved everything about it. It's just a much better game. It's a much better game in my opinion. Next up, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Holy smokes, ladies and gentlemen, they've done it again. They've done it again. They have remade older Pokemon games, and they've simply improved them in every single way. Better graphics, bringing the Johto region and technically the Kanto region for the first time to the Nintendo DS. The graphics, the visuals of finally seeing Johto with these improved graphics, and the music in the just update, they were cooking. They were cooking when they made these games. They clearly made them with so much thoughtfulness and love and care for the franchise, and these are by far the best games in this video so far. These are an easy S tier. They took everything about an A tier game, made it better, made it look better, made it sound better, made it play better, better balance, more variety of Pokemon. I mean, what do you want, right? They just made a good game better, and it is what it is. There was enough new content, enough new things to see to make these games just truly stand out above the rest for being just some of the best games in the franchise. Black and White. Woo, Black and White, man, I feel like at this point the DS had such a long run, right? When you think all the way back to 2007 with the release of Diamond and Pearl, and then you have up to 2011, I feel like those 4 years, that was like a big 4 years, right? And these games really tried to push the boundary of or push the limits of the DS console, right? You start to have where you're going through the cities and you're trying to, it pans down and looks at the city from a different perspective, more of a 3D type of view, or really like a 2.5D sort of thing. But Black and White, it's interesting. It's a fond time in my life. I remember these games coming out and loving them, right? But at the end of the day, this was the first generation of Pokemon games where I thought truly like the starters were just fugly. Like they were the ugliest starters we've ever seen, and really the entire generation is just filled with some of the ugliest, most forgettable Pokemon, right? You have some exceptions like Hydreigon, or however you say it, Conkeldurr, right? Like there's some really cool Pokemon in this generation, don't get me wrong. I thought the box art legendaries were cool, but they were a little bit bland, right? Black and White, I don't know, like I get the yin and yang thing, so a little bit mid there. I will say though that up until this point, this was the best story, right? Objectively, I guess I can't say that, but in my opinion, this was the best story of any Pokemon game up until this point, so it does get points for that. However, they also took out a lot of the old Pokemon, right? You didn't get if you wanted to play with Pikachu, too bad, right? It's all new Pokemon, all from this generation, and that's it. I didn't love the region was forgettable in my opinion, so really a little bit to love here, but a lot more downsides in my opinion. For that reason, these are landing in the B tier. They brought us a lot of cool Pokemon and a great story, but it was lacking in a lot of different areas, especially for being a new generation. Black and White 2, you're gonna notice actually in this video that Black 2 is the only mainline Pokemon game that I do not own, and that's for good reason. Oh bro, I just did not like, I didn't like it, and it's because I thought Black and White were just like barely acceptable, and then this game comes out and it's just more of the same. The Pokemon are still ugly. Now you can fuse legendaries, like what is this? What are we getting, a polymerization out from Yu-Gi-Oh? It was very gimmicky, didn't love it. The story was still okay, but it just didn't change enough for me. They did bring back some of the older Pokemon, which was fine, but like I don't know, man, like I hate the idea of fusions. I hate it. They just didn't do enough. They didn't do enough. I'm sorry. This is an easy C tier, just the impact that it had, it was a sour taste in my mouth. It was just more of the same, but now there's a new gimmick and it's like, I'm sick of the region. I'm sick of the region by this point. It's 2012. I feel like the Black and White just came out. Now there's Black and White 2, a sequel to both. You're not just going to do a definitive version. There's going to be, I don't know, like we were expecting a gray version, but I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. Sorry, it didn't do it for me. It lost its luster. Now you're doing too much, right? The fusions, you're doing too much. Stop it. And the kids that grew up with Black and White are probably squealing in the comment section below, which is fine because all engagement is good engagement. And look, it's okay to be wrong, right? It's okay to be wrong, but y'all are the reason I don't have Black 2, because you just push the price of that game up so much. It's like, bro, it's not even that good. Can I just, like, seriously? I'm not spending hundreds on it. I'm not. Next up, X and Y, baby. X and Y. My Pokemon X is actually still sealed. I don't know if you can see that. There's a sticker on the back. Unfortunately, I do think this is the UAE and Malaysian version. This is, I mean, it's all in English, right? Even the box is all in English. There's nothing really about it. It's basically the worldwide version, but this is the US version, North America, whatever you want to call it. And X and Y were good. This was the first set of games where the game was so easy, right? It was just so easy. You didn't even have to try. You just would steamroll the whole game, didn't have to worry about it, and that was it. However, the story was fine. The Pokemon designs were much better in this game than they were in probably the past 2 generations. I really did like some of the new Pokemon here. I loved the starter Pokemon here. I loved the idea of having like a knight, a mage, and sort of a thief or a rogue, whatever you want to call it. I liked it. I liked the jump to the 3D. I thought that this was a breath of fresh air. I thought that this worked really, really well. I also feel like megas were insane. They were the best gimmick we've ever had in any Pokemon game, and basically nobody even argues that. Like, everyone knows megas are incredible, right? They really were spitting with that, and then everything after that's fallen off a cliff, right? So X and Y, you know, there's some to you know, it's okay, but all in all, I would say that this was a good addition to the series, right? Bringing it up to 3D. I like the graphical style of these games. I know that we have 3D on the Switch, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but all in all, really loved them, especially for being the first games on the 3DS, but they were just too damn easy. They were just too damn easy. And yeah, I'm gonna give them a high B. I'm gonna give them a high B. They did a lot. There's a lot to love here, but it kind of marks like the beginning of the end of my challenge with the series, right? And so I have like a love-hate relationship with it, even though there's just so much that I do love about the games. So we're gonna go high B, maybe low A, but this one's probably the hardest one so far for me to rank. I'm doing high B. Like, it objectively did more for the series than Emerald and Crystal, right? Like, those were just definitive versions. It definitely goes above those in my opinion, but when I rank it in my mind against Red, Blue, Yellow, Platinum, Ruby, Sapphire, Gold, Silver, I don't think it's on that par, even though I do respect it for what it did. It was just too easy. It feels like they kind of lost touch with who their core audiences. They still thought their core audience was 7 years old, but surprise, it's not. Next up, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. We still have the sealed version of Omega Ruby as well. Once again, this is the international version. Unfortunately, it's not the North American version, but yeah, these games, goes without saying, incredible, right? Once again, they've remade an A-tier game. They've bumped up the graphical fidelity. You now can play in the Hoenn region in 3D with the same improved graphical style as X and Y brought along, with the same mega evolutions that X and Y brought along. They even introduced primal versions of the legendaries, which I think is a way cooler gimmick than fusions, which we saw in Black and White 2. Absolutely ridiculous. They still had the underground. They gave you mega evolutions for the 3 starters from these games. They had such an incredible post game. I mean, you could fly around on a Latios or Latios. Like, you could fly around the world, bro. Are you kidding me? Incredible games. Incredible. S tier, no question. S tier. They took an A tier game, they made it even better graphics, better music, better everything. Obviously it's an A tier and it had megas, but yeah, I mean, this run right here, this remake run that they were on, unmatched, right? That's how remakes should be done right here. Take notes. Any game company ever, if you want to make a remake, just do it like these 3 and you're golden. Sun and Moon. I actually, this is going to be controversial, loved them. Loved Sun and Moon. These were such interesting games for me because they brought us to the Alola region, right? And the Alola region is one of the most beautiful regions in all of Pokemon. I think the way that the Pokemon are styled kind of makes sense for the region here, which I feel like is the first time that they really did that. Like, they really thought about, like, okay, how would some of these Pokemon actually exist if they were in the Alola region, right? And so that's how you have like Executor with the huge neck and things like that. I feel like there's just so, it's very well thought out. It's a very beautiful game. I really liked the design of some of the new Pokemon here. I thought the box legendaries were pretty cool here. Obviously this is the 2-pack with the Steel Book. I was a Moon player. I thought that Lunala was just incredible, like a vampire bat type of thing. It's awesome, right? Incredible. Loved Sun and Moon. I loved them. However, the games were too easy. Once again, we fall into the same trap as X and Y. Way too easy, way too many cutscenes. Ew, stop it. That being said, because I like the design of the Pokemon, because I like the graphical style, the gameplay, I'm giving it an A. This goes an A tier. I know Alola just felt so complete. It just felt so interesting. There was enough of a breath of a fresh air, right? Like, there was no gym battles or anything like that. I just loved it. I loved what they did with Sun and Moon. Next up is Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and these, oh man, the Ultra Beasts I didn't love the Ultra much to be story. It was like aliens and now we're fusing again. Like, no bro, sorry, no, it just, it didn't do enough for me. And the post game was cool and you had the ability to get so many of the legendaries and you go into the ultra wormholes and all that stuff. It was fine. I played these a ton, I really did, and they are the definitive version of Sun and Moon. Like, if you're gonna play one of them, you'd probably play this one. But you know, when you look at the impact that Sun and Moon had, and then the definitive version was just aliens and fusions, and no, sorry, I can't, I'm not with it, I can't do it. But it was better than Black 2 and White 2, so I'm gonna put it above that. Next up was Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. We only have the Pokeball version for one of them. The Eevee is actually still sealed. I saw at Walmart the other day, this is $35, and this one, even the regular one, is like 55 or 60. So there's no love for Eevee out there. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are interesting games, right? Clearly an attempt at capitalizing on Pokemon Go and the hype of Pokemon Go. The thing is though, that Pokemon Go came out in 2016, the summer of 2016 in fact, and it took over the world. These didn't come out till 2018. So by the time these games came out, I was already over Pokemon Go. I was done with it. I feel like that game lasted a few months for me, and every once in a while I still go back and play it. Like last summer I played it quite a bit with my girlfriend. But the Go mechanics on the Switch, like, look, it's another remake of Red, Blue and Yellow, right? That's what it is. And the graphics of these games actually are incredible, right? Like, these are some of the most beautiful games on the Switch from a Pokemon perspective. I like what they did with the Pokemon Walker, the Pokemon Go, whatever this ball is, sorry, the Pokemon Go Plus, love that. So, you know, again, it lets us see Kanto in a new way, fresh coat of paint. It looks beautiful, friendly faces, all that stuff is great. However, again, some of the easiest Pokemon games ever. There's absolutely no challenge. You just face roll everything. You can use one Pokemon, a Charizard, to beat the whole game. Doesn't even matter. EXP share is just OP. It's broken. I didn't love the catching mechanics of this because, again, it's just a Pokemon Go gimmick. So like, it's just way easy. It feels like a watered down Pokemon game. It feels like it's basically baby's first Pokemon game, right? Like, that's what this is. It's just, it's super casual friendly. It's beautiful to look at, but that's kind of where it starts and stops for me. It felt lazy. It felt lazy. So putting it at D tier. I loved Pokemon Go. I like what they were trying to do here, but it didn't really, it felt like an afterthought, to be honest with you. It felt like they just kind of needed to slap a Pokemon game on the Switch near launch, and this is what we got. It was kind of a hybrid Pokemon Go game. Again, I love Kanto. I love the graphics. It looks beautiful, but it was too easy, a little bit boring. And when you look at the other remakes, right, like, these were just incredible. They were improvements in every single way. This was an improvement in graphics, but a downgrade in gameplay and no challenge. So sorry, it is what it is. I kind of had to force myself to beat them because I bought it, but I don't know. I liked it for what it was, but it was just a gimmick really, and just a way to explore Kanto in 3D. So whatever. I will say though, on the bottom of the box, you can see like the Helix fossil and the old amber and everything. And the attention to detail there is incredible. Pokemon Sword and Shield, the first real Pokemon game for the Nintendo Switch. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I actually kind of like these games. I feel like the legendaries, the box art legendaries, are pretty cool. The story was great. You first little taste of an open world game, right? You had the wild area. Thought the wild area was great, but you still had the linear format that we know and love from Pokemon, the linear storyline. You go from town to town, explore the world, catch new Pokemon. I thought a lot of the Pokemon from this game and that were introduced in this game were great. I feel like the story was good. It was a little over the top, like it was crazy, but from a graphical perspective, they nailed it. I feel like the starters were pretty cool from this game as well. And so all in all, I enjoyed Pokemon Sword and Shield. I know that it gets a bad rap for the wild area having some lag spikes. I know the textures on some of the trees people were crying about, but all in all, I would say as a Pokemon game, it's just a general new Pokemon game, I thought they were fine, right? You also got raid battles for the first time here. You got Dynamaxing, which was okay. It was, I guess it was slightly cooler than Z moves, although I liked some of the unique Z moves, but Dynamaxing was fine. It wasn't nearly as cool as, you know, Megas. Obviously it's just, oh, your Pokemon's big now, like it's a big old Pokemon, like, okay, that's fine, but I mean, whatever. I guess the competitive scene was cool for that, but all in all, I think it was good. I think it was a good solid Pokemon game on the Switch. I even completed the Pokedex in this game, which I've done for many of these games, right? Like, I obviously did it for Blue Yellow, I did it for Ruby and Sapphire, I did it for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire for sure, I did it for Heart Gold Soul Silver, I did it for Sun and Moon, I did it for most of these games, to be honest with you. I did it for probably half these games, but yeah, this was one of them. I did both the DLCs. I feel like the DLCs were pretty weak, to be honest with you. They're just whatever. There was like the fighting bear dude, Urshifu or whatever, and Calyrex or whatever the cold horse was. Didn't love the DLCs, to be honest with you, but I saying they were good games. I'm gonna put them up in here in the B category. I guess they'll be at the back of B, although I feel like these three games I could probably interchange depending on how I'm feeling that day, and I'd be fine with it. But they were solid. And also this game came out in 2019, and so I feel like I beat them when they came out, and then I revisited them during COVID, when I pretty sure that's when a lot of the DLC came out, and they kind of got me through COVID, right? And so I really appreciate that. Maybe I'm a little biased because of it, but I feel like they were solid games. I feel like the criticism of these games was a little bit blown out of proportion. Like, yeah, were they weak for the series? Sure, they were a little bit weaker than some of the, you know, other, you know, entries in the series, but all in all, I think they were fine. I think they get too much hate. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is the definitive way to screw up a remake. Basically what they did, right, they took all of the improvements from Platinum and threw them in the garbage. Okay, they threw them out. They said, we don't need any of those improvements, we're just going to remake the worst version. Okay, and then on top of that, they looked at the beautiful art style of the other 3D games, such as, I don't know, Sword and Shield, or even Sun and Moon, X and Y. They looked at the beautiful art style of those games and said, no, we're going to do something else. We're going to do chibis, and they're going to look like they're made of plastic. And on top of all of that, the games are still going to run really slow, just like they did for Diamond and Pearl. And on top of that, you're going to get input delay when you're using the Pro controller wirelessly. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I was measuring like half a second of input delay on the D-pad. It was like unplayable. I couldn't believe it. I was like, how could you have such a run of remakes like these, and then you outsource this to some other company? I don't even know if it says it on here who actually made these games, but it was a fumble. It was a huge fumble. Absolutely atrocious attempt at a remake. You took a good game and made it worse, and it was just a sloppy, lazy trash port. The other remakes are the definitive way to play in those regions, whereas if I want to play Diamond and Pearl, I'm just going to play Platinum. This game sucks. Sorry, it's trash. Absolute waste. Absolute waste. Next up, Legends Arceus. Now this is interesting because Game Freak and Pokemon Company stated that this was a mainline Pokemon game, but they never supported it as such, and it doesn't behave as such or act as such. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to make the executive decision. This is not a real mainline Pokemon game. Legends Arceus was ambitious, right? It was ambitious. It was the first, you know, sort of fork in the road for Pokemon where we went into a more narrative direction. Not that there wasn't stories in other ones, but that seemed to be like a big driving component. But also it was more of an open world take, like a full open world, even though there was like loading screens in between zones and things like that. It was an open world Pokemon game. And from a story perspective and a concept perspective and a design perspective, I was on board. From a gameplay perspective, I was in snooze fest after like 4 hours of gameplay. It was the Pokedex. You got to catch like 10 versions of the same Pokemon. Nah, I'm good. I'm not doing that. That's just, you're just kind of adding chores that don't improve my enjoyment of the game, right? Like, why I gotta catch it 10 times? Nah, I'm not doing that, right? They tried to add different combat mechanics and things like that. To me, it felt short. It felt like they were overcomplicating a solid turn-based RPG, which is what most of the Pokemon games up until this point were, in my opinion. They added you know, again, from the concept perspective of it being like an ancient version of Diamond and Pearl, I love the concept, but I just couldn't do it. And really the nail in the coffin for me was the render distance for these games was approximately 6 feet, right? And so you see this, you see the cover, the idea that is being portrayed by this cover is that it's this massive world, and you see that mountain off in the distance, you can go there, right? And unfortunately, honestly, the cover gives you a pretty good example of the problem with the game. Everything out in that field, you see this whole field here, right? The whole field, the mountain, you don't see a single Pokemon out there, do you? Right? And that's because the render distance for this game is about 6 feet. And so you stand on a rock or a cliff and you look out onto the field and there's just nothing. You're just looking at nothing. You're not seeing nothing. You ain't seeing shit. And that's because nothing's loaded in. Okay. And that's a problem because with the Switch, it was able to run Breath of the Wild, which beautiful game, looks great. Is it bumping up against the limit of the hardware? Absolutely, right? but it came out great. And a few years later, you know, the Breath of the Wild was like, what, came out in 2017, something like that. This game comes out in 2022 and is just a watered down version of Breath of the Wild. The open world is just, it just doesn't do it. It just tries and fails, in my opinion. And I don't know, I love what they were trying to do here, but it just fell so short because, and my assumption is that part of it is the Switch hardware is not good, but also, you know, we saw it succeed with, you know, Breath of the Wild. And I just feel like this was, you know, Game Freak's attempt at doing an open world. And I feel like Game Freak, the studio of Game Freak, just wasn't big enough to make what they wanted, right? They had this grand vision and only so much time to release it. And it just was a shell of what it should have been, in my opinion, right? I love the concept. I like what they were trying to do here, but the render distance, graphics, frame rate, the experience was just so bad that I just couldn't get into it. I'm sorry, I couldn't. I know that there's going to be some ragers in the comments down below. They're going to be seething, they're going to be coping, but the truth is that the game plays horribly and it is what it is. I'm sorry. There's a reason Pal World sold more copies than these games, right? It is what it is. Okay, on top of that, it is better than the remakes of Diamond and Pearl. I'll give it that much, at least. I made it farther in this game than I did in the remake, so at least there's that. But all in all, not a great game. Scarlet and Violet took the open world concept and they really brought it to a new generation of Pokemon. And basically, you know, all the problems that we had with the frame rate and the render distance and all the problems that we had with Legends Arceus, this game fixes none of them. Actually, there's a memory leak. They never really patched a lot of the bugs. There's a lot of problems with this game. It's been out for years now. They still have not gone back to fix a lot of the glaringly obvious problems with the playability, like the actual functioning of the game, right? With that being said, some of the new Pokemon are okay in design, from a design perspective, but the rest are kind of mid. It is what it is, right? Like Tinkatonk was awesome, love it, but I had to go back. Like when these games came out, right, I played them for a couple days and I got maybe, you know, 4 gyms in, and I just quit, right? I quit because the game played so poorly. Like it was actually just unplayable, and so I shelved it for like a year and a half, and I came back and I looked it up and I was like, okay, well, you know, I feel kind of guilty that I never beat these games because I've beaten all the other ones, right? Besides the F tier, I've beaten all the other ones, even the D tier, and completed the Pokedex for a lot of them. And I felt bad that I didn't give this a try. And I thought, okay, well, surely a year and a half later, it's fixed, right? And it's just not. And so what I did is I forced myself to beat Pokemon Scarlet, so that way when I give it a bad rating, I can say it with confidence, right? I can say with confidence that it's actually a bad game. The story saves it at the end, and that's the problem. The story going through it with Arvin and his dog or whatever, it's touching. It's very sweet, right? It is very sweet. The story with Team Star was mid. Okay, the gym battles were fine, but I just didn't love it. I didn't love it. The professor and the story, like the post-game story going into like Area Zero and everything, that was easily the best part of the game, but it was at the end of the game and I had to like slog and just grind through an overall like unenjoyable Pokemon game just to get to part of the story that's sort of interesting. And the climax was great, right? It was a great finale to the game, but all in all, it just fell super short for me. Terastallizing is super dumb. It makes your Pokemon look goofy. Okay, you look like a chandelier. It looks just ridiculous. I have yet to see a terastallized Pokemon that looks cooler than its regular version. I like the concept of terastallizing where you can like give a Pokemon another type. I think that's cool, but visually it's the least appealing gimmick out of any of them by far. It's just atrocious. And on top of all of that, let me just remind you that there are about 4 buildings that you go into throughout the entire game. There's the school, the Pokemon League, the gym, like to start a gym challenge you go into a building, and then at the very end of the game you go into like these abandoned labs for the professor, right? Besides that, there's no other interior zones. You cannot go into the buildings, and it just feels so unfinished. Like you are in the open world always. You try to go into a shop, great news, it's a menu, right? You walk up to a store, you want to buy an item, it's a menu, right? There's not even Pokemon centers anymore. There's not even marts anymore. There's no housing. You can't go into the house of an NPC and just walk around and talk to people. Like you are just outside the whole game, and it just feels like something's missing. And the problem with that is that the outdoors in this game are not interesting because the game is mostly empty land and the render distance is 12 feet as opposed to the 6 feet in Legends Arceus, right? So all in all, like, there's just very little to love about these games. They play horribly, the frame rate has problems, they're buggy, the graphics aren't very good, the story only gets good at the end, the new Pokemon are okay but not great, and also the non-linear fashion of the story, I just didn't like it. I'm gonna be honest, like, I know that Pokemon gets a bad rap, at least throughout the years it got a bad rap for being very linear, but like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my opinion here. And I feel like the way Sword and Shield did the wild area is what they should have done with Scarlet and Violet, right? Like, maybe have 2 wild areas instead of 1, but like, most of the routes should have just been linear because clearly the game can't handle a full open world. It simply can't. It just can't run well on the Switch, or if it can, they just didn't have the team to make it happen, right? Again, it worked with Breath of the Wild, it doesn't work here. So the hybrid open world approach of Sword and Shield actually works much better because they can at least make, even though the routes are linear, they're more detailed, they're more vibrant, they look better, they're full of life. There's you know, NPCs you can walk around and talk to. I mean, the world in this game is just, it's half baked. It's like they put it in the oven and it was only 30% done when they took it out, right? There's just so much work that needs to be done, and then the fact that they still haven't done any improvements to any of the bugs in the game, it's just crazy how this is, you know, a first party title from Nintendo. I guess technically it's not first party because it's Game Freak, but you get the point. It's a mainline Pokemon game, and it just it's horrible. It's really just horrible. The only thing that I can give it credit for is trying, and I guess people like shiny hunting, but besides that, can't do it. Sorry, I can't do it. It's not for me. It falls way short, and it is what it is. Anyway, guys, this is the definitive tier list for Pokemon mainline games. This is the correct opinion to have. I know that some of you might be thinking, oh my god, like, you're so humble, like, you're so right, you know, how are you so wise, how are you so intelligent, how do you know these things so surely, how do you speak with such conviction? And it's just one of my many talents. So anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. If you don't agree, then go back and replay these games, and once you replay them, you'll realize that I was right all along. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about, I mean, obviously, like, the elephant in the room here is that 4 of the 5 Switch games are trash, right? Like, that's the elephant in the room here. So hopefully the next Pokemon games that come out are good. I'm not gonna pretend like Legends ZA looks good. It doesn't look good, especially if it comes out on the Switch. Like, if it's on the Switch too, I'll buy it, right? I'll try it out to see if they fix the problems with the original Legends game. If it's on the regular Switch, I'm not even gonna buy it. It's not worth it. It's not gonna be good. I already know it's not gonna be good. So like, that they wouldn't have fixed any of the problems from the first Legends game, so it's not gonna be worth it. So anyway, hopefully whatever the mainline, like the real, not ZA, but the real mainline game is that comes out for the Switch 2, hopefully that's good. Hopefully it's better than Scarlet and Violet, because otherwise I am very worried for the future of the franchise. And also, like, Nintendo, can you just like port some of these games to the Nintendo Online? Like, what are you doing, brother? Like, come on, just let me play these. All right. Also, just know that if you leave a huge angry paragraph in the comment section below, I'm probably not going to read it. I do want to thank you for watching the video. I want to thank you for the ad revenue and engagement. I'll probably just link you to this part of the video and just let you know that not going to read it, bro. I'm sorry. It's, again, if you need more clarification as to why you're wrong, you can re-watch the video. Just make sure you turn off your ad blocker, watch the video again, and then once you have that come to Jesus moment, you realize that, oh, actually he's spitting, he's right, you can let me know in the comment section below, and you can apologize for your super long comment. Also, if you think that some of these games deserve to be higher, for example, like Scarlet and Violet or Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, Black, White 2, whatever, ask yourself, are the games actually better, or is it just that your time in your life was better? Maybe you played them with a childhood friend, maybe you played them with your boyfriend or girlfriend at the time, maybe you played them in college and that was a nice fond memory for you, right? Or in high school. There's probably some other emotional reason why you think that they're better than they are, but unfortunately this is the correct answer, so anything that deviates from this is wrong. So again, if you need to rewatch it, go ahead and do that. Just want to let you know, not going to read the paragraph. Thank you for the comment, thank you for the engagement, thank you for the dislike. I do benefit from all of that regardless, so thank you. Have a good day. Anyway, with that being said, drop a thumbs up down below if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe and turn on the bell to be notified the next time I upload a video. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This is Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.